Let's go ahead and talk about Pride Month and the Bible verses Christians keep using against the LGBTQ community when they really need to move on. We're about halfway through the month, so I already dropped a devotional that went extensively into the verses, and I'll go ahead and link that below or in the comment section. But here's where we are now. And before somebody types, the Bible clearly says, no, beloved, the Bible says a lot. Your tradition may have said it clearly. Your pastor may have said it loudly. Your denomination may have printed it in bold. But volume is not exegesis. So let's do the work. Let's start with Genesis 19, Sodom. You know the passage. So Genesis 19 is not about two men dating, living and loving with each other, getting married and building a life. It's about an attempted gang rape. It's about violence. It's about domination. It's about a city trying to humiliate strangers at the door. Even Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 49 and 50 says Sodom's sin was pride, excess, ease, and refusing to help the poor and needy. That might sound familiar in today's society. So, if you want to preach Sodom, preach against violence, preach against cruelty, preach against failed hospitality, but do not take a rape text and use it to condemn covenant love. That's not Bible study. That's theological identity theft. Let's move on. Leviticus 18 and 20. Now, Leviticus says, on the other hand, you shall not lie with a male as with a woman. Yes, the text is there and we got to deal with it. But Leviticus is part of Israel's holiness code. It deals with ritual purity, land, kinship, worship. Christians do not carry over Leviticus in a flat one-to-one way. We do not enforce the purity rules. Because if we did, a lot of y'all living in sin. I digress. We do not rebuild ancient Israel's legal system. We do not apply the death penalties. So the real question is not, is it in Leviticus? The question is, how does this command function in its ancient world? And how does Christian ethics carry it forward? And Leviticus is not talking about modern sexual orientation. I want to say that again. Leviticus is not talking about modern day sexual orientation. It's not talking about same-sex adults in a faithful, mutual, loving relationship. That category was not on the table. Let's move over to Romans. Now, in Romans 1, Paul talks about people exchanging the natural relations for unnatural ones. But read the whole argument. Well, I tell you, if we can just read things in context, we would probably save ourselves a whole lot of trouble. Again, I digress. Romans 1 is tied to idolatry, excess, lust, and a world that Paul sees as disordered. So then in Romans 2, turns around and says, you have no excuse when you judge others. Ooh. That's gotta hurt. Church folks quote Romans 1 like it gives them a badge. But Romans 2 comes along and walks in and takes the badge back. See, Paul is not describing two women raising kids, praying together, paying bills, and loving one another faithfully. He is describing lustful excess tied to idolatry. Context matters. Yeah, that part. Unless context only matters when it protects your favorite doctrine. Let's move on to 1 Corinthians 6 and 1 Timothy 1. Now let's talk Greek. The words malakoi and arsenokoitai, malakoi literally means soft. I mean, literally. Depending on context, though, it can also mean morally weak, undisciplined, luxurious, effeminate, or sexually passive. It does not simply mean gay. Arsenokoitai, on the other hand, is a whole lot harder, and some scholars actually believe that Paul just made that word up and it was something only unique to him that he used. Take that one on. But here's the thing. It's probably built from Greek words meaning male and bed. Some scholars say it broadly refers to male same-sex acts. Others argue it points to exploitation, prostitution, pederasty, look that one up, coercion, or abuse. Here's what you cannot honestly say. Paul clearly meant loving modern mutual same-sex relationships. No, this is doing too much. Paul did not have our modern categories for sexual orientation, and translating these words as homosexuals imports a modern identity into an ancient vice list. We need to slow down. This is not translation. This is tradition sneaking into the text wearing a fake mustache. Jude 7. Then Jude says, Sodom went after strange flesh. Again, Jude is pointing back, wrong way. Jude is pointing back to Genesis 19. That story involves angelic visitors, sexual violence, and boundary-breaking abuse. It is not about LGBTQ people living faithful lives. Stop making every text say the thing your fear wants it to say. Let's talk about Jesus. And let's be honest. Jesus never condemns same-sex relationships. Not once. But Jesus does condemn hypocrisy. He condemns religious leaders who tie up heavy burdens and place them on other people's backs. He condemns people who strain at gnats but swallow whole camels. And baby, some of this anti-LGBTQ theology is camel heavy. So here's the point. You can hold a non-affirming opinion. I want to give you license for that. This is America. You can do that. That is your conscience. But stop saying the Bible clearly condemns loving mutual covenantal same-sex relationships, because the verses that people use are about violence, purity codes, idolatrous access, exploitation, domination, or debated Greek words. Not Pride Month, not modern LGBTQ identity, not faithful love. And if your theology requires LGBTQ people to live lonely, hidden, ashamed, or half alive just to please God, maybe the problem is not their identity. Maybe the problem is your theology. And that theology needs to be, shall I say it, born again. So this Pride Month, don't just wave a flag. Open the text, check the language, and stop making the traditions of men the law of God, because Jesus already had smoke for that. Mark 7. And he did not miss.